Oh, that's appropriate. Good morning. You can hear me all right? Good. For those of you who weren't over at Stevens Point, my name is Joel Yeager. I'm a retired WELS pastor. Kind of filling in, I used to serve on the Military Services Committee, but I've been off of that committee for a few years. I was on it for about 20 years. I was the civilian chaplain in Europe from 1986 to 1992, so that's a long time ago. My presentations are pretty dated, and so I asked Paul Horn to give me something that I could use. This is a variation of his presentations. He is now the National Civilian Chaplain. He's the first full-time National Civilian Chaplain that we have, and his work is dealing with military personnel, interfacing with the Pentagon and the chaplains, the military chaplains at the Pentagon, helping military contact pastors get set up with being able to visit military people on the installations that they're responsible for, and a variety of other things. And so any mistakes in here, they're his, not mine. Let's see here. Oh, it's not behind me. There it is. So, WELS Ministry of the Military is part of the Special Ministries Commission, and you see the 8 focuses of the Special Ministries Commission on Special Ministries there. Military Services falls under that. The purpose of Special Ministries is to assist parishes, agencies, and families to meet the spiritual needs of people which are not adequately met through regular ministries. Why do you think ministry to the military would be under Special Ministries? This is the mission of military services, to make God's word and sacrament available to actively serving military members and their families. Why would you think that falls under the Commission of Special Ministries? What's special about their situation? Pardon? They're mobile. Yep. They're sometimes stationed where we don't have a congregation, or sometimes they're deployed. Sometimes they're overseas. Sometimes they have no access to a regular congregational ministry. So that's why they fall under Special Ministries. As we go through this, we're going to see how the Military Services Committee carries out this goal, this mission, to make God's word and sacrament available to actively serving members. First of all, we've got here's our committee. Paul Wolfgram, a veteran of the Marine Corps, 2 tours in Afghanistan, is our chairman. That name Wolfgram might look familiar. His father was a missionary in Hungary years ago, and his brother Luke was in Russia until just a couple of years ago at the beginning of the Ukraine war. Then they pulled him out of Russia because of the Ukraine war. He lives in Germany now. He's kind of like a contact with all of the churches that we're in fellowship with in Europe, Eastern Europe, actually all over Europe. Adam Lorenz, Marine Corps Reserves, he's actively serving right now. Rob Neely, retired, an Army colonel. Rachel Fedderson, a Navy officer wife. Holly Bond, a Navy officer wife. Ryan Pearson, a retired Air Force person. And Reverend Josh Martin in Jefferson, Wisconsin. He was the European chaplain for about 9 years. And then the ex officio members there, Joel Gertner's chairman of Special Ministries. Paul Horn is the National Civilian Chaplain, and Rob Weiss is the chaplain in Europe right now. What do you notice about most of the people who are on our committee? They served or are serving. They served or are serving. That's a transition. It took us a while to accomplish that. When I was asked to serve on the committee, I'd been in Germany for 6 years, and then I was in St. Lucia in the Western Indies for 10 years as a missionary, and then took a call to Milwaukee, and Al Wold showed up at my installation and said, "You're on the committee." And I said, "No, you didn't call me. My congregation called me, and you can't have me for 6 months. This congregation gets me for 6 months at least, and then we'll talk about it." So in February of 2003, I went to the first meeting, and they said, "Oh, you're the chairman, and there's one other person." And so it took us a while, took us some missteps and whatever to develop the committee, but this committee is a really active committee, and it gives good input to the committee because their spouses whose spouse is serving or has served. There are people who are serving. They understand military. If you haven't been in the military, it's a culture unto itself. It's filled with all sorts of not pseudonyms, but all sorts of short terms and initials. And if you haven't served in the military, you can get lost really easily. And for a WELS pastor, so many of our WELS pastors grew up going to a WELS elementary school and a WELS high school or prep school and a WELS college and a WELS seminary, and this foreign culture of the military is something that is new and unique. And one thing that the committee does is help those who serve military understand the uniqueness of ministry to military and the military culture. How do we go about it? Well, we can't serve people if we don't know who they are and where they are. WELS.net/refer is the most important thing that you can remember for ministry to military personnel, because there you can refer, you can submit names and addresses, and those names and addresses go to the Special Ministries office in Milwaukee, and then it gets distributed either to the European chaplain, to a military contact pastor who's serving a location where that person is stationed, or to the National Civilian Chaplain. I think actually all the contacts go to the National Civilian Chaplain or the European Chaplain, and if somebody's stationed at a place where we have a congregation, that local pastor also gets that information. WELS.net/refer. Can you say that with me? WELS.net/refer. That's on, all you have to do is input that at the homepage of WELS.net. Just put in refer, and you'll come up to that. And on that red box that's there that says, I can't read it, what does it say? Special Ministries Online Referral. You can refer students, college students, so that's important here, like for Stevens Point University. You can refer people who are in prison, incarcerated. You can refer people in the military, and you can refer people who are civilians, but they're located someplace where we don't have a church, so that the contact information gets to whomever might be closest to that individual. I got to turn the page here. Did I miss something? There should be one missing. It won't go back? There we go. I hope that's right. What about people who serve in the Far East, places like Guam, Okinawa, Japan, South Korea? We don't have people near those installations, Australia and the Philippines. Formerly, when we had a missionary in Okinawa, he would travel some of those places and conduct services for the military personnel. Right now, we know of 15 family units that are someplace in the Far East, military personnel. We probably have at best a third of the WELS people in our database who are in the military. Because if you take the population of the United States and you take the number of people in the military and divide that, it says there should be so many people per capita. You take the WELS number, and we end up with about a third of what we should have. So it's really important that congregations, pastors, congregation secretaries, parents, grandparents, friends, give us this information at wels.net/refer. Right now, Chaplain Horn is planning a trip to that region, I think in January of 2025, to visit some of the people there. Okinawa has been a place where we've had large numbers sometimes, and if the missionary from Taiwan couldn't get there, the people were having services on their own with some sanctified lay leaders. Sometimes as many as 35 people were gathered together in someone's home for a worship service that was coordinated. Right now, Joe Gum, who is in Hawaii, Honolulu, and Pastor Horn have every Sunday service, 9:30 a.m. Japan time. I don't know what time that is in the United States, but they take turns doing an online service. This service, I think it shows only 2 people present, or 2 groups there. Pastor Horn's at the bottom. He said, but sometimes they have as many as 15 people online for that Sunday worship service that they do through Zoom. In Europe, we serve our people with a European civilian chaplain. Rob Weiss, shown there with his wife Rachel, was commissioned back in July of 2023, and he arrived in Germany in August of 2023. So he's the new civilian chaplain. Before him, it was Hartwig. He had been a professor at the seminary. He was fluent in German. He actually had a degree in German before he went to the seminary, and he had served in Africa and in the Southeast Asia before he was a seminary professor, so he was well equipped to live in Germany. Living in Germany, but the ministry's in English. Chaplain Weiss and his wife live in Spiesheim, which is between Mainz and Kaiserslautern. Kaiserslautern is where Ramstein, Americans say Ramstein Air Force Base is, which you probably hear a lot about. That's the main Air Force base where troops transiting into Europe or even through Europe are going to stop at Ramstein. And Landstuhl Army Hospital is right outside Ramstein Air Force Base. So that's an important place. He has a service there twice a month on the second and the fourth Sundays. I think at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is what time that service is now. There's been, the European civilian chaplaincy started after the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War, we had really good cooperation with the Pentagon and the military chaplains. The divide between church and state wasn't so big then, we had chaplains, we had pastors who went to Vietnam, were sent for a year, and they would visit the troops. They were given a security guard, a religious affairs officer, enlisted man, an NCO, traveled with him as a security guard. They got helicopter hops to the various camps where he knew there were WELS soldiers. As that Vietnam War wound down, the chaplain who was the pastor who was there had about 6 months left on his leave of absence from his congregation, and so they said, we want you to go to Europe and find out, is there some ministry for us there? And so that's how the European chaplaincy started. When I was there from 86 to 92, there were over 100,000 U.S. troops in Europe, from England and Scotland down through Germany, the Netherlands, into Italy, and even on the island of Sicily. There weren't any in Austria, but all through Germany, lots of places in Germany. The number of troops the U.S. has in Europe now is down considerably, but we still have about 100 family units listed of people who live in Europe. Some are not military, most of them are military, and that's who Chaplain Weiss serves. With a rotation of services, he goes to Stuttgart, to Vilseck, and where uses a German church. Is it listed here? I forgot. In Vicar, which is near Frankfurt, they use a German church where they have services. We went to England. There were 2 of us when I was in Europe, and one of us went to England always on the first Sunday of the month. We rotated. 1 month one would go, 1 month the other guy would go. And up until Pastor Weiss came, we've been serving in England still once a month, mostly civilians these last years because there's very few military left, but there's quite a few WELS people living in England. We've discontinued that now because now we have 2 missionaries living in England who are working at gathering a congregation in London and in Birmingham. A lot of those people are people from the Salem Lutheran Church in Hong Kong. They've left Hong Kong because they recognize that soon the freedoms that they have in Hong Kong are going to be gone. And so they've moved to different places. Actually, to New Zealand, some of them have moved. To Australia, some have moved. To England, some have moved. And so with no longer needing to go to England, now that gives the European chaplain an opportunity to go down to Italy more often because there are troops there. And we're working at figuring out how we can serve Poland, because there are more and more WELS troops, more and more U.S. troops in Poland. Some of them are on TDYs, temporary duty assignments, so they're not there with their families, but more and more families are also going to Poland. And so that's also a place where they're trying to figure out how to serve. The challenge is that if you have a German registered car and you have insurance, German car insurance, unless you pay a huge premium, you can't drive that car legally into Poland. At least it's not protected by the insurance. And if you rent a car, you're not supposed to drive it into Poland. So how does the chaplain get there? Well, mass transit is pretty good in Europe. Trains are pretty good. But once you get someplace, how do you get to the installation where the people are located? A lot of times if they're TDY, they don't have a vehicle themselves, and those installations aren't in the center of the city where the train station is. So there's some challenges. But Pastor Weiss is very resourceful. I'm sure he's going to get that all figured out. How did I get back to that? There we go. One thing that the European chaplain does twice a year, Reformation time and Easter, he organizes a retreat where people come together, usually at a youth hostel, which really works pretty well. This was the Easter retreat in Heidelberg, I think it was, at the youth hostel. That's what that word there, Jugendherberge, that means a youth hostel. When the first years I was there, we would get 250 people for the Easter retreat because people would come from all over just for that retreat. Not so many now. Here's Pastor Horn's installation. I had to correct him. He had his installation listed as August of 2024. I said, no, it was 2023. The arrows there, I thought they were supposed to fly in, but I must have messed something up. That's me way over on the left. Over on the right, I don't know if you recognize those people from the back. Who are those people? Pastor Horn's in-laws, the Hermansons, and his wife Becky by the lower arrow. That was at Grace Lutheran Church in Milwaukee, which is Pastor Horn's home congregation. Here's his family. One son is in Chicago, working in Chicago. A son and a daughter are at MLC, and the youngest 2 are at Luther Prep. And Pastor Horn's wife teaches at Reformation Lutheran School in San Diego. 2nd and 3rd grade? Am I remembering right? 4th and 5th? 3rd and 4th, okay. Why does the National Civilian Chaplain live in San Diego? Because of the number of military personnel in that area. When we were moving toward a National Civilian Chaplain, a full-time guy, we researched 6 areas, and all were areas where there's a WELS congregation as well as a significant number of troops, so that the National Civilian Chaplain could have regular contact with troops, not just WELS troops, but with other troops, and also with the military chaplaincy, because they're important for our work, because they enable us to get onto installations and places where we have services, like in Europe where we use the base chapels. The local chaplain has to approve that. And so those relationships with the military chaplains is really important. And actually they're They're very helpful. They're very respectful of the fact that we don't participate in the military chaplaincy. And they're also, as their chapels are available, they're also generally very happy to accommodate us because they recognize that troops that are served spiritually are better troops than nuns who are not served spiritually. And if they can't serve those troops and someone can, generally they're very accommodating, very happy to have us there. San Diego has about 150,000 active duty personnel, not always there because the number of ships that are out at sea, obviously those troops are gone, those sailors are gone. There are also about 240,000 veterans living in the San Diego area. So that's also a resource for ministry to military. This ship, it almost looks like it's an aircraft carrier, but it's not. It's an amphibious assault ship, so that would have helicopters, and several battalions of Marines would be on those ships. And so the purpose would be to get close enough to land someplace, to make a landing, I shouldn't say an assault, but I guess that's what it would be. And there's Coast Guard, there's Marines. The only thing that really isn't in the San Diego area, there is not an Army post there someplace. Pastor Horn's made a lot of connections, living already in San Diego for a year now, actually a little more than a year, I think. This guy is a Navy SEAL, a retired Navy SEAL. Pastor Horn met him through, Pastor Werner is the pastor at Reformation Lutheran Church in San Diego, and pastor's wife works in a program for SEALs who are retired, who need some rehabilitation, some reorienting toward civilian life, broken SEALs they call them. And so through Pastor Werner's wife, Pastor Horn has met a bunch of these broken SEALs and has a regular ministry going on with them. This guy's name is Skip. I don't know why that's important. Some more of Pastor Horn. Here's a contact. Oops, I missed one. There we go. Here's a contact from before he was National Civilian Chaplain, when he was pastor at Lamb of God, I think it was, in Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue University. And this young man, a WELS guy, was in ROTC, graduated, and now he's in San Diego training to be a helicopter pilot. And he and another young Navy officer have formed a youth group, or actually it's really it's a 20s group, because he recognized how valuable campus ministry was that Pastor Horn conducted in West Lafayette at Purdue. And so he's working at getting people his age who are in the military together for Bible study and fellowship. And so we've got some tremendous opportunities to do ministry. Here's Pastor Horn at one of his finer moments. He's got a way of talking himself into getting all sorts of experiences with the military. This is with jumping with the Golden Knights, which is the Army's precision skydiving team. How he did that, I don't know, but he did. He travels the country visiting congregations that are near military installations. We have about 125 what we call military contact pastors, because they serve installations that are near the military bases. Again, part of his job is to help orient those guys when they're new to that military contact ministry, because so many of them don't know anything about the military. It's such a different animal. Here he is in Mobile, Alabama, with Tom Spiegelberg, who is very active serving Coast Guard people. Mobile, Alabama has a large Coast Guard, what do they call it? Sector, I think, Coast Guard sector, and Pastor Spiegelberg very active in that. The Coast Guard enables WELS pastors to actually become Coast Guard chaplains without the things that the rest of the military requires. And so he's actually He and Fred Voss up in Alaska, in Anchorage, are both Coast Guard chaplains. And Pastor Spiegelberg actually followed me in St. Lucia before he went there. Here's Coast Guard Sector. Oh no, this is Coast Guard Sector Mobile with one of the helicopter pilots. Fort Stewart, Georgia. I got to think about what's the connection to Fort Stewart. One of your daughters is married to yeah, what's Hefty? Yes, okay. So, and is that your son-in-law there? Can you tell? Or he was going on night manures, probably through Becky's brother-in-law, who was stationed there. Is he still at Fort Stewart? Still there. Okay, he's been there a long time. Yeah. That's right. I guess I heard that. He was deploying to Poland. Yeah. Do they have a child up at Luther Prep? 2 at Luther Prep. Okay. That's where I ran into him last time, I think, was at Luther Prep. Pastor Horn keeps in contact, especially via Zoom, with war fighters all over the globe. He's a point of contact. He writes a devotion that goes online every Friday. He does it live. It's also there printed if you don't want to watch it live. And through that, and through the contacts that the previous National Civilian Chaplain, who was part-time, Paul Ziemer, had, he has a lot of contacts with people who are in isolated places, people who have gone through trauma, all sorts of stuff keeps him busy. And here he says this is with an intelligence officer in the Middle East. I think that's why the picture's so shaded. We're not supposed to be able to recognize who that is. What do I got next here? That's an aircraft carrier. WELS.net/refer, we talked about. Chaplain Horn and Chaplain Weiss are concerned for the individuals in the military to establish a healthy devotional life. One thing that they stress is be in the scripture, do your devotions, listen to stuff online. They're also training people to prepare and lead Bible studies, because there are places where even Chaplain Weiss and Chaplain Horn can't get. Like this picture is Team Luther. This is the USS Eisenhower. One of those guys was trained by a pastor on the East Coast to be a distinctive religious group leader. All the military denominations, all the military branches allow people to be trained, if they're vetted by their denomination, to be a leader. And on an aircraft carrier, there might be 2 chaplains, maybe a Protestant chaplain and a Catholic chaplain, or maybe a Protestant chaplain and a Jewish chaplain. But the chaplain here on the Eisenhower gives them, I don't know if it's still going on, if the guy's still stationed there or not, but it gives them an hour every Sunday morning, and anybody who is Lutheran can come to that service. And then those who are part of the WELS also receive Lord's Supper because of the distinctive religious group leader who have been trained. We have 5 military personnel trained right now to do that, and 5 more are in training. The only problem is the chapel is right under the flight deck. It's the first deck under the flight deck. So if they're launching, it's underneath the catapults where the planes are launched from. So if they're launching when they have their service, every once in a while they have to stop and just let the noise subside. But those who serve on a carrier are used to that type of thing anyway. This is Paul Schultz, who's the pastor at the other church in the San Diego area in Chula Vista. He is with the commander of the Marine Corps, I don't remember. I missed one again. There we go. I must push that too hard. I don't know. Does it look like they're having fun? One guy's having fun, huh? Basic training. Basic training is a place where the military is very, very diligent about not letting contact with outside, even with, maybe phone call to parents and letters from parents. They're starting to allow WELS chaplains, WELS pastors to actually visit personnel if they ask for a visit from a WELS pastor. And so they're also, we're working at training guys to get into how you can get into basic training in order to spiritually minister to WELS personnel. The next one, which we already saw, there we go. This guy's the commander of the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, which is in San Diego, one of the places where Marine recruits do their basic training. And somehow they made a connection, and this commander allows Pastor Schultz to come every Sunday and have a Lutheran service for the Marine recruits who are going through basic training. It's been a fantastic opportunity. The numbers are unbelievable here. In the last 4 years, Pastor Paul has had over 6,000 in attendance, distributed 500 Bibles, and baptized 30 recruits. Pretty amazing. Pastor Schultz and Chaplain Horn are working at writing a devotional booklet for Marine recruits. And Pastor Horn and others are currently writing devotional booklets for recruits in the other branches, Air Force, Army, Navy. I'm not sure about the Coast Guard. Next we got, Great Lakes Naval Air Station, where Navy does some of its recruit training. And their pastor Seth Hawkinson from Waukegan, Illinois, has worked on a relationship with the Navy and the Navy chaplain, and he's able to get to any WELS people who are doing their basic training there. Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Jude Peck is an Air Force veteran, and he's being trained as a distinctive religious group leader to do services at Fort Jackson. That's one of the places where the Army does its recruit training. Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. There's a distinctive group leader there who visits once a month, visits all of the Air Force guys going through recruit training, or going through their basic training. One of the things that the Military Services Committee does is organize every year, every 18 months, a military contact pastor conference. We started those not long after I came on the committee. We recognized that there were a lot of pastors who were military contact pastors who just didn't know what they were supposed to do and how to go about it. And so we started going to some area where there was a military installation, finding a chaplain, a military chaplain who was willing to meet with us to tell us from his perspective what ministry to the military was like. We looked for family members who could talk to us. We looked for military personnel who could talk to us. And we always went someplace where there was an installation so that we could get on an installation and tour the installation, get a feel for military life. And then specifically invited pastors who were new at being military contact pastor conferences. This was Air Assault School, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The next military contact pastor conference is in Layton, Utah in May of 2025 at Hill Air Force Base. I don't know why he threw this picture in. We were doing rappelling off of the tower, and that's me trying to get down. It's a little top heavy. You might be thinking, what can I do? We're not near a military installation. Well, first of all, you can pray for our military personnel. With your mission offerings, you support ministry to military. Part of what the Military Services Committee does is funded through the Synod budget. Some of it comes from congregations, for individual offerings. Individuals give offerings. Some of it comes from school groups where they're giving their chapel donations. The Owls, if you're familiar with Owls, the organization of WELS Lutheran seniors, gives $50,000 a year to the Military Services Committee specifically for the European chaplain. That started a number of years ago when you remember when basically the Synod budget was, I don't know, kaput or whatever you want to say. Military services got cut completely. We got no money from the Synod budget for a number of years. And so in order to keep our chaplain in Europe, we had to really work hard. Prior to that, we would tell the people who are coming to service in Europe, continue to support your congregation. You have a home congregation someplace. Give your offerings to them so that that can go. But once we were cut off, then we said, no, now it's time for you to give your offerings to Military Services Committee so that we can keep this going. At the same time, 2 chaplains were reduced to 1, but we recognized the need for more work and also for the partnership that comes from having more than 1 chaplain. And so at that time, we started to send retired guys who would go to Germany for maybe 3 months or 6 months or sometimes even a year on a half salary. And Owls at that time said, hey, that's a good ministry for us to support because those guys who are going over there, they're Owls also. And even though we don't do that anymore, the Owls have continued to support ministry to military with $50,000 a year, which is a tremendous blessing. Military personnel are eager for spiritual resources, and so Military Services continues to send meditations to all of the people on our list, wherever they might be around the world. And Chaplain Horn and Chaplain Weiss are distributing catechisms and hymnals, teaching catechism class. It's a tremendous blessing with the technology that we have. When I was civilian chaplain, I sometimes had 8 or 9 catechism classes going because they were all over the place. Some of them met every week where they live close to where I live. Some of them met every 2 weeks. Some of them met once a month. Try keeping track of what you've told what group. But now, because of technology, he has a Zoom class once a week, and he can get everybody together at the same time from all over Europe. Actually, one of the missionaries in England has a son who's in 8th grade, and he said, I'd rather have you teach my kid confirmation class than me teach my own kid confirmation class. So part of that confirmation class is also the son of one of the missionaries in England. And so Pastor Horn and Pastor Weiss both are conducting catechism classes for youth through Zoom, important part of their ministry. Another important part of our ministry to military is Lutheran Military Support Group, LMSG. Lutheran Military Support Group is veterans banding together to support other veterans, and they also support military services to active personnel. But their main focus is supporting veterans. Here's something coming up in Camp Shiloh in Texas, building bridges. It's a retreat for those who are suffering post-traumatic stress, those who have been affected by what they've experienced in the military. And they come together and they're building each other up. They're encouraging one another. Lutheran Military Support Group is an important part of our ministry. And that just says .or, huh? It obviously should be .org, not .or. I wonder if I messed that up because on my printout here it's right. What do I got next? Another thing which I mentioned, military devotions. Pastor Zemer started doing this a number of years ago. First it was just online, and then he started recording it, and Pastor Horn has continued to do that. You can go to wells.net/military and subscribe to that devotion, and once you do that, every Friday, there will be smiling Pastor Horn sharing a message designed especially for military personnel. The Commission on Special Ministries has established a program for chaplain certification. Chaplain certification is necessary these days because many hospitals, nursing homes, prisons won't allow pastors to come in and serve their people unless they have some sort of certification that they've been trained to do that. It's really frustrating for some pastors when they can't get to see their people. And of course, during COVID, it was even worse. And so Special Ministries has started this chaplain certification program. There's some general courses about chaplaincy, and then you can concentrate on jail ministry or military ministry or college ministry. It's administered through Martin Luther College, and it's an important program to help people become better at serving people with special needs. Lutheran Military Support Group, for any veterans who want to do chaplain certification, you don't have to be a pastor to become a chaplain, although you might have to take more courses than a pastor who wants that chaplain certification. Lutheran Military Support Group will fund the expense for any veteran who wants to take the chaplain certification courses. Another thing that we do for the sake of our military personnel is Christian Family Solutions, called MAP Counseling, Member Assistance Program, that if a military person is in need of counseling and they contact Pastor Horn or the Special Ministries Office or Pastor Weiss, Chaplain Weiss, they can get 5 counseling sessions that Military Services pays for with Christian Family Solutions, a Christian counselor, and if more is needed, there's also the opportunity. Lutheran Military Support Group may help with further sessions if it's considered necessary. What is that? What do you see in that picture? One of our troops in Iraq sent that picture. It's an old picture. It's probably 10, 12 years old. But what do you see? Chaos? People running? Someone hiding? This picture was taken by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He wrote, "There are 3 kinds of people in society. People who generally live at peace with each other and don't want to hurt anyone. These are the sheep. Then you have people who are wolves, who want to inflict pain and bring violence to the sheep. The third person in society is the sheepdog. The sheepdog feels a sense of duty and service. The sheepdog feels a need to protect the sheep and is willing to bring violence to the wolves and meet them head on if needed. Sheepdogs need shepherds too. They have the good shepherd, Jesus our Savior, who alone brings strength, comfort, healing, hope, and encouragement for our warfighters and their families. We get to share our good shepherd with the sheepdogs." That's ministry to military. And then comes the QR code. If you want to get to WELS.military, WELS.net/military, you can scan that. Or you simply go to WELS.net and put in military in the search box, and you'll come up to the military services page that has lots of info, lots of resources, lots of other places to look for information and for help. That's what I got. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes? They got more questions than that. I'll try to answer your questions, if there are any. Yes?
In the previous slide, it looked like a young child was embracing a soldier.
Yes.
Or being by the soldier for protection.
Right.
Am I right?
That's correct. Yes. And Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's point was that the soldier is the sheepdog. The soldier is there to protect those who need protection and to do violence to those who are trying to hurt the sheep. So the kid is the sheep, and the soldier is the sheepdog doing the protecting. Yep. And our veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq, they carry a lot of burdens. They carry a lot of burdens. If you know any of them and you know they're suffering, refer them to Pastor Horn or to Christian Family Solutions, because there's some very good resources and some very good help out there for our warfighters who are hurting from seeing things they should never have seen and doing things that they should never have had done.
In regards to the chaplaincy certification program, it takes roughly about 2 years, give or take, depending on when the courses are offered. Usually, I'll talk with a couple people that I know because I just went through it. Usually, Martin Luther Elder Care Ministry sponsors for X number of students that sign up for the geriatric and care facility course that they can go through. And some of the courses that you go through, talking about a spiritual approach to forgiveness, looking at addiction from a different point of view, help them out, and it's been very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Well, thank you so much for your support of WELS ministry to the military. Keep them in your prayers especially, and keep people like Chaplain Horn and Chaplain Weiss in your prayers also, that they can meet the needs that come their way in serving military personnel. Yes? That probably, I don't have a specific answer. It depends upon bandwidth. Generally, like even the guys who were in Iraq and Afghanistan, they had access to internet. Sometimes there was only so much. You maybe only got so much time, and maybe it wasn't very good. Although in the camps, I think it was pretty good. When you're out in patrol, you probably didn't have very much. And at sea also, I think it's limited just because of, an aircraft carrier has about 6,000 personnel on it. And so, you imagine how much bandwidth that would take in order to support something like that. So they do, they're not forbidden to look at time of grace or home congregation services or anything like that. The best thing congregations can do is make sure that their services are archived at their site, because the possibility of them actually having time when something's live is really remote, especially when you get a foreign deployment, and you get your temporary duty that you got to go out on training missions, and so you want that stuff available so that when they're there, they can go back and grab it and listen to it. There was talk about in Iraq and Afghanistan that they couldn't take their Bibles, and that wasn't true. They weren't supposed to distribute materials to the local people, which was done for security reasons. As a Christian, I'd say, well, I'm not going to follow that order, but on the other hand, the brass had good reasons to do that kind of stuff. They weren't there to proselytize, but for their own service, they could definitely. Pastor Zemer was at Fayetteville, North Carolina, with special forces troops, and he had a couple of people who were distinctive group leaders. They'd get back from a mission, they'd clean their weapons, and get their weapons ready for the next patrol. And then before they showered, before they ate, they would have chapel. One of the guys would lead them. So the cooperation that we had during the Vietnam War in today's setting with the liberal media and the separation of church and state, we have to be pretty careful about how we go about serving. We don't want to alienate the military in any way, because if we do that, then we're definitely not going to be able to serve. Pastor Zemer was actually able to get into Kuwait a couple times years ago, but we tried really hard to be able to get a chaplain in to visit troops, and it just wasn't going to work. Other than if somebody took a civilian job in one of the posts and then would have time to do ministry on the side, that might have worked. There were a few years in there where we had more SEM grads than we could use. You remember that? That actually happened? I tried to convince the assignment committee to send one person and have them get a civilian job. They could get a post office job or a job for a bank that's serving military personnel in Kuwait, and then he would have 5.5 days of work. He'd have 1.5 day where he could try and organize services. And I suppose rightfully they said that's not the spot to send a graduate. Graduate needs to serve a congregation and get his feet wet and learn ministry by doing it. I said, well, then let's call someone. And they said, no, we won't do that either. So I guess I wasn't persuasive enough. Maybe Pastor Horn can get that done.
To the military, what is their
Well, the chaplains are in the military. I'm talking about military chaplains, not civilian chaplains. So the chaplains are assigned to units. And the number of chaplains is based on the size of the denomination. So the larger the denomination, the more chaplains you could get. Even if our synod was willing to participate in the military chaplaincy, we would get maybe 2 or 3 in the Army at best. And then they're assigned to a unit someplace. They aren't free to just go and serve WELS personnel. You're assigned here, and this unit, or these units, are your responsibility. I think we can serve our personnel better the way we do now than if we actually had people in the chaplaincy. If we had people in the chaplaincy, tremendous opportunity to proclaim God's word, counsel people to share the message of Jesus. But it wouldn't be so effective in serving WELS people in the military. All right, I guess you get to hear me again after a while, so.